This is a TalkStation original podcast.
Hi, I'm Ryan Kelly, and on this week's episode of Senior Moment, Lynn Schultz and I talked to January Brown about dementia-related issues and community resources available to older adults and caregivers. It all starts right now on Senior Moment. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us for the Senior Moment. And I have Lynn here on the podcast with me, as usual. And today we have a special guest of January Brown from the East Carolina Council. And then there's many words that go after that. I always forget it, so I'm going to rely on you to add in the rest of your title.
Hello. So it's Eastern Carolina Council Area Agency on Aging.
There we go. And honestly, January is one of the best experts that I have ever worked with in knowing everything about aging, especially in Eastern Carolina. All of the resources that are available. She is somebody that is a spectacular resource for our area to reach out to and talk to find out. But today we're going to be focusing more on Alzheimer's and memory issues in general, and some of the resources that are available and some of the things that are really important to do, and then some of the initiatives that are happening in our area. And so welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Why don't you, there's always everybody thinks it's Alzheimer's. When an elderly person starts to forget things, everybody automatically assumes they have Alzheimer's. Do they?
Well, the biggest thing that we always talk about is what is normal aging versus not normal aging. So as we age, we know that our brain is going to slow down a little bit. We might forget things. I mean, I know I'm in my 40s and I forget where I put my keys sometimes, or I forget a doctor's appointment, and that's normal. But it's certain things like absolutely forgetting a date and saying, hey, what year is it? Oh, it's 2019. Okay. No, but okay. And then like 10 minutes later, you ask them again and they say, no, it's 2019. Well, to them, that's that short-term memory. To them, that might be 2019. So that is not normal aging. We always say with dementia, there are so many forms out there. There's over 100 different types of forms. So when you have memory loss, going to a neurologist and finding out exactly, is there an issue? What is going on in that brain? Not only that, what type do I have? Now, granted, Alzheimer's disease is the most prevalent and most diagnosed form of dementia. But you could also have frontal lobe dementia, which affects a lot of your balance and your problem solving. But there's so many forms, which with dementia, it's the part of the brain that's being affected. And so if there's only a certain part of that brain, only those items in that part of the brain that's stored there are going to be affected. So I may not be able to problem solve, but I might still have some good long-term memory and short-term memory. So that part of the brain that does the problem solving is the only thing affected. So that's a type of dementia. Now, when we're talking about Alzheimer's disease, granted, that is the entire brain. Over time, different parts of the brain are going to be affected as the brain progresses, which is going to affect our mental. But down the road, also, as the disease gets to late stages, it does affect us physiologically.
How would somebody find out if they have regular memory loss that occurs as a person gets older versus if it is something that is Alzheimer's or Lewy body dementia or one of the hundreds of diagnoses that you mentioned?
So the best way to do it is to go, of course, to your primary care physician, talk with them about what is occurring, because under Medicare annually you have your physical exam that's covered by Medicare, and part of that is a mental cognitive test. And in talking to your doctor about what you're seeing or what you might be seeing in your loved one, I always tell people, if it's just a one or two occurrence, it may not be an issue, but if you're seeing a steady pattern, keep a log. What are you seeing? What are you noticing? That way, when you're talking to your physician, you're making sure that you're advocating for yourself and communicating what your concerns are. Then once they can run a memory test, it's a mini cog. If they see some issues or whatnot, they will refer you to a neurologist. So they will have to make that referral for you for Medicare or your insurance to cover it. And then the neurologist can do further tests with you, such as memory tests. They might do a CAT scan or a PET scan, see what's going on in your brain so they can visually see if there is any change in the tissue in the brain or the cells. Because Well, and what dementia is, dementia, the word, if we think about it, is kind of like cancer. So if I say I have cancer, most people might say to you, oh, I'm so sorry, what kind? That's what, as a society, we need to get to. My loved one has dementia. Oh, what kind? Because the kind is what's going to be the person in front of me, what I'm going to experience from that person or have what they experience. And so knowing that specific diagnosis also helps you. Not that I can plan it out and say in 6 months we're going to give you chemo and then we're going to go through rehab. You're not going to have that plan, but you're going to know what to expect so you kind of know where the course is. My course is going to be different than anybody else's course because, as we know, the brain is very complex. And so over time, I might experience things that somebody with the same diagnosis might not, or mine might be worse. So just knowing that type is going to help people kind of know what to expect with that change in the brain.
It brings me back to pre-COVID days. You and we actually ran into each other at a conference, and they had I believe it was a neurologist that came and spoke and was talking about treatments and essentially the lack of development and treatments that had occurred and how much effort had been put into finding cures for cancer. And I believe that now Alzheimer's is actually the most feared diagnosis in America. Has there been some progress that you're aware of in treatment?
So there is quite a few things. I know currently right now the FDA is working on approving a new medication. Unfortunately, there is no medication that stops dementia. There is not. There are medications out there that do slow the progression of the brain deterioration and the plaque buildup in the brain. But the sooner you get diagnosed and get on that medication, the better it is. If you wait, that medication may not help you. It's supposed to help in those early stages of the diagnosis. That's why it's also important to see a neurologist, because they can figure out what kind of medication might work for you to slow that progression.
I just mentioned how a lot of people consider this to be a diagnosis that's worse than cancer. When you get this diagnosis, does this mean that it's all over? I mean,
no, it does not.
What happens with your quality? Is your quality life? Do you walk out of the doctor's office and you're just not going to be able to do anything anymore?
And there's that fear that I don't want to know, because if I do know, every little thing I forget, I'm going to think, it's
cautious.
Yes.
So, is this the disease?
Right.
And back when I started in school and we were learning about this diagnosis, they said that life expectancy was about 5 to 7 years. So as I said, I'm 40, so this was a long time ago. And the issue about it is it's not that the life expectancy has changed, because now it's 10, 15, 20 years. It's not that it's changed. People are getting that diagnosis sooner. So your life expectancy it's not in 6 months you're going to pass away. It's something that could go on for many, many years. They always say it's the longest goodbye, because unfortunately with that person you start seeing those changes. Those memories slowly are going away. They have big dips in their memory, and then they'll plateau for a while, or they might get one day light bulb goes on and they remember everybody and everything. So it's very different for every person, but they're saying the life expectancy is, average 10 to 15 years. Major thing about dementia is it is not an old people's diagnosis. For so many people, they're just old and, that happens when you get old. No, it's not. Early stages is, when we say early stage onset, it's 50s. They have people in their 20s and 30s diagnosed with forms of dementia. So this is not an older adult's type of disease. There are certain things out there that might mimic it. Knowing that any type of dementia is a slow progression. It is not an overnight they got bad and the next night they got bad. Because as you both know, working in long-term care, there are things that can mimic dementia, which they call temporary delirium, such as urinary tract infections, even pneumonia. Older adults, when they have surgeries, the anesthesia, it takes longer for their kidneys to process it. So they might come out of anesthesia very confused. It might take them a while to get their memories back, but that's all temporary. That is because I've had a lot of caregivers call, oh, my mother's getting worse this past week and worse and worse and worse, and I don't know what dementia she has. And I'm like, stop.
Right.
Let's go see the primary and make sure that they're not have an illness.
Yes.
Because it could be an illness, not dementia. Because if it's happened in a week, it's not we're possibly not looking at dementia.
Stress.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Stress.
With caregivers, they go, well, I don't know if my loved one has dementia or I do. And I go, yes, you have to question yourself sometimes, because we call it a caregiver fog. Because you're in their life so much, sometimes you start to think, did I forget something? Because they forgot it, and did it ever really happen? So, and I'm like, no, you don't have dementia. You have a caregiver fog. It will come back.
I call mine multitasking.
Yes.
That's my story.
Yes.
We don't concentrate on any one thing 100%. Our minds are all over. So that's my story. Multitasking.
Stick to it.
That's right.
After we take a short break, we'll talk about the resources that might be available to both the caregivers as well as those who have been diagnosed with various types of dementia. Again, you're an expert in this field. And then maybe we can discuss some of the initiatives that are going through Eastern North Carolina and what your group is working on to try to make Eastern North Carolina a more dementia-friendly area.
Hi, this is Lynn Schultz at Carteret Landing. We invite you to visit our beautiful assisted living community. Carteret Landing pairs exceptional, compassionate senior care with the stylings of a resort. Our beautifully appointed suites, common areas, and bright and engaging memory care neighborhood can provide you or your loved one with the quality living they deserve. Carteret Landing is in Morehead City, right behind the Friendly Market. Come by and see us today or call for your personal tour at 252-773-0980.
And welcome back. I am here with January Brown and Lynn Schultz from Carteret Landing, and we are discussing really memory issues, dementia, Alzheimer's, and wanted to talk a little bit with January about the life expectancy and that that really hasn't changed, but people are getting diagnosed earlier. Does that also mean that there's a wider diagnosis that's occurring? Is Alzheimer's and dementia diagnosis on the rise?
It is. It is very on the rise. Even just with our aging population, you have to look. We have our baby boomers that are aging in every day. And so they're saying nationally, on average, that by 2025, there'll be more people in the United States over the age of 65 than there is 0 to 18. So we've got that large baby boomers. All those babies are aging finally. And what we're also starting to see is that decrease in caregivers. So if you have that number that's lower coming in, that will be our caregivers eventually, our CNAs, the aides that work in long-term care facilities. But the population's not there, but our older adults are definitely there. There is a crisis with that. And so knowing that the life expectancy is long, not only that, what's out there for those people? I mean, the caregivers, the family members, and the person with the diagnosis. So there are so many services out there, which is really nice. It's that proactive. Okay, I've got my diagnosis. We know this is going to be the long course, but what do I do? Does this mean I'm going to be in a skilled nursing facility for the rest of my life until I die? Well, no. You can live independently in the community. And not only that, your caregivers and your family members can have that support. There are tons of supports, especially here in Carteret County. You have your senior center here, who is amazing. They have what they call Family Caregiver Support Program funding and assistance to help caregivers with different types of things that they might need for their loved ones. But not only that, staying active and being young, they have evidence-based classes, they do games, things that will spark those memories. They do the home-delivered meals. They also do a meal program where you can go over every day and say if you just want to sit with a knitters group and knit some things and have a lunch. Staying social is a key component. Just because you got that diagnosis does not mean, as Lynn, as you were asking, is this the end of the world now?
Right,
Am I done? No, you can still live your life to the fullest. And they also say with dementia and even just being older, staying active is good for the memory. You've got to fire those neurons in the brain, because if you don't use it, you'll lose it. We've heard that for so many years,
And we see it actually in the community. We see folks coming in that are a little slow, and boy, they get in with activities, socialization, and it's such a huge change. So staying active, you're right.
And we had talked earlier about reminiscing.
Right.
Your short-term memory might be impaired, but your long-term memory, or your middle memories might be good. So reminiscing, looking at pictures, one of the words we say it is a curse word among people with dementia, and family members, caregivers, community members, we are horrible with using this curse word. You never say remember to somebody with dementia, because you know what? They probably don't. And that's frustrating to them, especially in their early stages. And so I want you to think of a bookcase. At the top of that bookcase is your short-term memories. The middle is your middle memories. And at the bottom are your long-term memories. But at the bottom of that bookcase is also your emotions. So as dementia, depending on what type, is pushing on that bookcase, your books are going to fall. So my books are going to be different than Lin's books, and my pages are different than Ryan's. There is no librarian in Carteret County that can put those books back. Once they're gone, they're gone. So as a librarian, if you say, oh, don't you remember that book? No, that book's gone. It doesn't exist in my library. And as the disease pushes and pushes, say we get to the middle memories, and I went in and visit my mom in the nursing home, and we got in a fight. And I said, you know what, Mom? Don't worry about it. You're going to forget it. I'll see you tomorrow. And I come back tomorrow. She's not going to remember why we fought, but she's still going to be mad at me. That emotion is so strong. So we always say emotion, touch, knowing people are there for you is so important, especially with dementia. We always say they're hypersensitive. Children with autism are the same way because they respond to emotion. So making them feel good, making sure that they're comfort, they're not in this alone. We say it's the longest goodbye and hard for us for caregivers, but we don't realize how hard it is for the person with that diagnosis, especially early stages when they know what's going on. It is very difficult because, as we said, hey, 10 to 15 years, that's a scary diagnosis. Well, all of us say we never want that. Well, imagine you got it. Now what do you do and how do you feel? So knowing that there's support out there, there are caregiver support groups. We have one here in Carteret County. When COVID happened, we moved it to a Zoom platform. It meets weekly, and caregivers love it. They become very close. They feel connected. And as a caregiver, we don't just need once a month. Sometimes we need more than that. And that's what this group has developed into. There's also even classes that the senior center holds. It's important to get that education, be informed about the diagnosis, and know if there's a family history. Because they are showing evidence that it is hereditary. There are groups of individuals that are more susceptible to dementia, such as African American females. They're doing huge studies on African American females are really susceptible to dementia. I encourage people to look up studies. They have studies that are they're for dementia and Alzheimer's, that you don't have to have the diagnosis to get started. They're years and years and years. I mean, we're talking 7-8 year studies where they're trying to take people that are not diagnosed and follow them through that whole process, that if they do get dementia, what did that course look like? So we encourage getting involved in different types of things like that. Also, just online, if you're not able to go in public and get a support group, there's support groups out there for people with dementia. I know as a caregiver, I sometimes have to talk it out with a caregiver, but that person with the diagnosis has to talk it out too. Right. We have cancer support groups where cancer patients talk to each other. So people with dementia need to start making that connection because it's hard for them and they need to talk it out.
So my grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I remember that my grandfather, through his church, would be able to take her to Adult Day where they would watch my gram for a little while. But that was in Charlotte. Where can people find the resources that are available to them around here?
So we have a great program through Coastal Community Action. It's called the Senior Companion Program, and that is older adults that have retired and they sit with loved ones. And so family members and caregivers can contact Coastal Community Action and inquire about that. And what they will do is they set up a individual, retired older adult companion to come over and to give the caregiver or family member respite. It is not a cost to them because it's through a grant that we give their agency. And the nice thing about that is when they set these volunteers up, they are set for certain days for certain hours. So you know in your week, hey, on Tuesday and Thursday, my senior companion's coming to sit with my mom for an hour and a half. So you know you've got that set break. But it's not just good for the caregiver. The care receiver is also getting a large benefit out of it because a lot of time as family members, we may be on caregiver burnout, but you have to remember your loved ones around you 24 hours a day too. And so they're not always, they're ready, they're on burnout, they're on recipient burnout, not caregiver burnout. So that is a great program. The only thing with that program is they can do no personal care and they do not clean the home. So if somebody's still mobile, as we call a walkie-talkie, they're mobile, don't need personal care assistance, that companion program is wonderful. Now, if somebody needs assistance with, and this is both for older adults, you don't have to have just dementia for this. You also have the Department of Social Services here in Carteret County. They provide a service called In-Home Aid, and that is where it is an aide that can do that personal care. So they might be able to assist that older adult with taking a shower and getting dressed and bathing and doing that personal care needs. And that would be set up same way. Certain times of the week, you would have that service. And that helps individuals to stay in the community. I mean, that might just be all that person needs to be able to get through the day. So if we can put that in place, that would be what we can do. So those are two of the services that are really good for caregivers to give them a respite and also for the care recipient. Also, the senior center, like I said, they have different classes that can help out. Unfortunately, in this area, the closest respite program we have is down in Onslow County. And then there's also one in New Bern that's open on Wednesdays at the New Bern Senior Center. But hopefully, maybe in the future, we could do some planning and maybe hopefully have some type of program like that here in Carteret County. That would be wonderful.
That would be really good.
It's a big need.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
Huge.
And it's kind of like daycare. It's like, I want my loved one home, but I have to work because I've got to have insurance and I've got to have income.
Right.
We've been talking about all of these resources. Where is a place that somebody can go and just to learn what is available? I mean, I'd love for everybody to replay the show over and over again. But if they're doing research themselves, where should they start their research?
So 3 places. Me. I can help individuals. I can help you. If I don't know the answer, I will definitely find it
If
for you.
you've heard, she is the expert. We've said that.
So, but definitely calling our agency at our phone number at 252-638-3185. Or even our website at www.eccog.org. But also reaching out, like I said, to your senior center. They're a very good resource. They even have different pamphlets and information there that they can refer you to, and they have services. And then also your local Department of Social Services.
Wonderful. Thank you. I know that this is a show that we could continue to talk about over and over again, and that with you being such an expert in all of these fields, we will definitely have you back on the radio show again, or on the podcast again. Sorry, I'm still back on the Senior Moment first edition. So, but I want to thank you for coming in today. Lynn, as always, thank you for everything that you do. Lynn is also a great resource, so if you have any questions, please reach out to Lynn at Carteret Landing, and she'll be able to help steer you in the right direction.
Would love to.
And I hope you'll have a great afternoon.
The Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council present the story of Cynthia and Ed.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, out of the blue, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. And she didn't know whether she should go forward or turn or just stay at the stop sign. She wasn't even really sure where she was at. She was very concerned. It was very unsettling for her.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it, to bring the family in on it. I felt so much better after my son told me, "Mom, I don't want you to worry or be afraid. I'll be there for you and we'll figure it out."
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.